Hello, dear participants of Polyglot Gathering. I'm Dmytro Kushnir as Simultaneous Interpreter, and today I will be speaking about polishing our underused languages for work, but not only for work. So, I work with the following 4 languages: Ukrainian, Russian, English, and Polish. Polish is the language of my ancestors, but I learned it as an adult. I was over 20 years old back then. And at some point, I realized my Polish was suitable for work, and I started using it as a simultaneous interpreter. But I noticed that I was slightly less confident about my Polish at work than I was with my English. And there is one more particular feature about simultaneous interpreters. We are polyglots in essence, but our purpose of using languages is also earning money, which is an additional motivation, but also it is a restriction, because we always want to deliver a very high quality to maintain reputation. And I actually heard one interpreter saying that he would not go to interpret at an event if he is not sure that he knows the subject better than at least 50% of the audience. And I believe the same is true about the language. Many interpreters would not interpret if they were not sure that they know the language better than the speakers. So this is a very strong limitation, and it leads to the vicious circle, so to speak. The interpreter refuses to work because of being unsure about this language, and then the interpreter starts to forget the language and becomes even more unsure, and this continues. What can we do in such a situation? Well, we can break this circle, and there are different ways to do this, which basically are about wanting to actually start working. So one of those ways is to volunteer. I mean, volunteering is not a situation when you don't care about the result. No, actually, sometimes volunteers care even more than people who are paid money. But in case something is less than perfect, well, you're at least not paid money, so you're not responsible, so to speak, for any mistakes that may happen, but hopefully they will not happen. Another option is audiovisual translation. And especially during the COVID-19, we could see the rise of online events. And because of the worries about the quality of internet, some speakers would record their presentations and someone needs to interpret them. Such tasks can be done from the comfort of one's home. And you can also slow down the video and then interpret and then make the audio faster. And there are special tricks to make your voice sound the same in such a situation. So this is something that I also gladly do. And also, if you have not worked with the language for some time, you can pair with a colleague who is more experienced and who is ready to help you out in case something happens. It's a great thing that we as interpreters work in pairs, so someone can give you a helping hand. And also there are written translations which are not exactly the same, but they help to discipline your mind, to train your mind to look for the right equivalents on the internet, and in the end of the day, it is also useful for interpreting, and you can charge money for this from the start. So this is what I did back in 2017. This is my very first simultaneous interpretation, and this was a great event in Kiev. More than 100,000 people in the central street, and we had this wonderful speaker visiting us, Nick Vujicic, and there was an interpreter on stage. That wasn't me. I was a part of a big team working together to interpret him for broadcasts into 9 different languages, including sign language. So I interpreted into Polish. Unfortunately, because of technical issues back then, my sound was off for the first 20 minutes, so I hope no one could hear my interpretation. But I got this practical experience. It was great, and the next jobs I did were for money. And this is one more example. It's also me volunteering, and it looks like I'm having a hard time, but actually I'm enjoying the experience. My face just reflects the emotions that are conveyed by the speaker. So we all know this German phrase. We know it from an unfortunate source, but the essence is true. If you use your language at work, this is a tremendous help. This is the best probably way to improve your language, whatever it is. In my case, I'm speaking about Polish. And if you are getting ready for some important event, your ability to memorize difficult words is somehow much higher than in a situation when you are doing this just for fun. And here are some things that I did sort of outside of work to improve my level of Polish. In 2018, actually, it had to be 18, I founded a Telegram channel. And one of the things I did there was this 1,000 words challenge. So I challenged myself to learn 1,000 words by doing it gradually, 10 words at a time. Here you can see a sample of such words, and here they all have to do with vaccination, but it's not COVID-19 yet because it's 2018, so it's only about measles. Yet the words were there. So did I succeed with this experience? Well, first let's look at my sources. Mainly I used the following sources. First, my job, because as interpreters we learn a lot. So bits and pieces of my subjects I worked with were used as a learning device. I basically memorized those words and they were on my list. One more big source was Polskie Radio 24, which is an informational radio station of the National Polish Radio. One more radio station was Radio Chrześcijanin, which is great because first, I'm interested in the topic, but also in many languages, religion is somehow a part of the history of the language. So all the lofty words come from there. And also there was a popular science channel, Uwaga, Naukowy Bełkot, and other popular science channels as well. So what was my total score in the end? Well, I learned 327 words, which is not exactly what I planned, not exactly 1,000, but still the experience was great. And quite recently, in 2020, I at least found some theoretical basis on how to build my learning program. This is Hadar Shamesh from Israel, and this is the Fluency Wheel. which you can find on YouTube, and she will tell in more detail what it is. But basically the idea is that in language learning there are these 6 areas and you have to develop in all of them. Otherwise this simply doesn't work. If you know all the grammar and all the words, but you have a terrible accent and you never spoke, well, you may face difficulties in communication. So here are my scores, so to speak. We Ukrainians understand Polish quite well, most of us, especially those who tried to learn it and consume some content, so I did not have challenges with it. Grammar is in many ways similar to Ukrainian, but also if you put in some effort in the beginning, you don't have to come back to grammar a lot. With confidence, accent, and active vocabulary, I was slightly less confident, well, because I didn't speak much, and also I back then didn't know anyone who could help me improve my accent, which is different now because I attend Polyglot Gathering and I met the right people here. So I just noticed that I had those limitations with active vocabulary, and this is what I did back in 2018. You could see it in the previous slides. But here is something I didn't notice, and it is speaking time. I didn't speak Polish outside of work for many years, and this was the root of the problem. So the solution of the problem, in case you don't live in the country where the language is spoken, are, of course, conversation clubs. And when it comes to English conversation clubs, I actually had some experience even in the physical conversation clubs, so to speak. I mean the offline ones. And we had one back in my home city of Vinnytsia. It was an English club, so we helped each other to learn English. But even with such a popular language, we could observe that those who mastered English to a high degree, they would soon disappear from the club because, for instance, they emigrated somewhere or they found a job in a new city. And even I disappeared at some point because I left for Kiev for the most of my time. So this was a wonderful comeback because in 2020, during the pandemic, I discovered the Fluency community, and they have free English clubs for all English learners who are eager to participate and be respectful to other participants. So I practiced there for a while, and then I asked myself, and wouldn't it be great to have a speaking club in Polish? And as it turns out, there is a club in Polish, and originally it started in Wrocław. It was an offline club for immigrants who want to improve their Polish, but because of the pandemic, it moved online for some time, and it became possible for people from other countries to join, including me. And at some point, I even started my own club, which you can see in the bottom. So both of them are on Facebook. If you are interested in Polish, go check them out. All the meetings are free, of course. So I started attending the club in Wrocław online, and this was a huge inspiration because it's a very different situation from having a club in your hometown with language learners who are doing it just for fun, mainly. And there, many of the participants are actual immigrants who want to improve their Polish because they want to find a good job, they want to get friends, get a normal life in their new country. So their motivation is very strong, and they put a lot of effort into language learning, and the results are obvious, and so it motivates to develop. So it motivated me to come back to my old practice of looking for words, but this time with a more conscious approach, with putting those words in practice through speaking clubs. But I decided to broaden the scope of my sources. So here are some of the sources. Let's discuss them. Since we are all interested in languages, I hope I will start with the sources about languages. The best program so far that I have found about Polish language is called Słownik Polsko-Polski, and the expert that is the author of the program or co-author of the program is Jan Nodek, a very popular old man from Poland who inspires and have been inspiring for many years people to improve their Polish. One more source is a blog, Obcy Język Polski, which has some really good and deep articles about Polish language. And the next thing I would like to advertise here is the application of the Polish radio. And it actually gives lots of opportunities. There are all the channels of the Polish radio, but also some channels that exist online only. And one of them is about language. It consists of small bits and pieces, radio programs such as 100 Sekund Polszczyzny, I guess. And yeah, and it also has some good music. So I like it. And also there is Mateusz Adamczyk. Let it be a surprise for you. Well, it's a very deep channel. One more thing that I can mention here is channels for language learners. Well, it can be a surprise in the sense that my presentation is about improving the level of the language, which is already quite high. But you see, sometimes there are words that we don't know, and sometimes the fastest way to learn them is through watching some channel for language learners. For instance, if I don't have a car and if I have never worked in this area of automotive industry, I maybe don't know some of the elements that are in the car. And if I go to Easy Polish and they show me a car and name all the elements, well, it helps to learn the word. And also there are some channels for Russian speakers who are learning Polish. One of them has been recently created by my colleague from Poland, and the channel is called Polski z Maćkiem, and it is, again, quite deep. It's interesting for those who are starting to learn the language, but even I sometimes find some tiny surprising bits that I hope will make a difference. And there is one more channel, and obviously the person is very modest because the name of the channel is her name, and she's from Kaliningrad. She's Елизавета Kinal, and she also has a very good channel for beginner and intermediate learners. So historically, I rely on radio quite heavily when learning languages, and therefore here are some radio stations for you if you want to improve your Polish. So one of them is Polskie Radio, obviously, and once again I encourage you to use the application because there is lots of stuff inside. There are some new radio stations without any advertising in them, which is really cool. They are listener supported, and they are Radio 327 and Radio Nowy Świat. They were started by people who formerly worked for Polish radio. And there is a list of other radio stations. Some of them are quite general, some of them are about music. You can choose whatever you like. The only criterion is to choose something you can listen for a long time. One more good idea is to read some press or some magazine, because it is published on a regular basis. So if once a week, let's say, Politica is published and you are subscribing it, so you don't have any chance to avoid reading the magazine, so you will have to read at least an article or two, not to feel guilty, and thus you will probably learn some good expressions because it's a really high quality magazine. And if you want to read something free of charge, there are such opportunities as well. Tygodnik Powszechny, for instance, has this opportunity for people to read up to 6 articles per month free of charge. And as for me, 6 is quite enough. I wouldn't have time to read more anyway. Some more sources for you language learners. So there are some emotional words which are seldom heard on the radio, but which people use in real life. If you want to learn those, I have discovered a great YouTube source about exactly this. It is called Piontek, and this is a YouTube series about a fictional character, but also about some real elements of life in Poland. His language is real poetry, and there are lots of curse words in there. So if you don't know something, you can always check it on miejski.pl. And there is also this little website, piekielnie.pl, where people tell about some terrible stories that happened to them because of others. Sometimes also very emotionally and very funny. Okay, so one more wonderful thing to look for a new word is long conversations, or long dialogues, or long interviews, whatever you call those. So there are such channels as Rozmawiam po lubię, or Imponderabilia, or Podcast Radioaktywny, where people would speak for 2 hours with each other. So just like when you are reading a book, the author wants to use the most complicated words in the beginning and then switches to the normal language sometimes. And some polyglots have this advice: when you start to read a book in a foreign language, skip the first 20 pages or so, and then get interested in the book and then come back and read the difficult part. Well, in the world of spoken language, people want to sound simple in the beginning, but then after some time of the conversation, they would accidentally drop in some deep word, some unexpected phrase, and this is the thing you would be writing down. And if you know the language really well, you can speed the video up a little bit and then slow it down in the most interesting places. And one more good source of information is podcasts. So I will briefly mention the ones I listed here, but of course, your choice is endless because podcasts are easy to create, and they are created by many people, including me, but I podcast in Ukrainian. So the first one is the first podcast I discovered in Polish, and it is called Chitu Chitu. This is something I would normally be not much interested in because I don't read much, but still, somehow I found this podcast, and at that particular episode they were discussing translation, so I got interested, and then I listened to more episodes. So basically this is a source of advice if you want to find a good book to read, in Polish especially. highly advisable. Lepiej teraz and po ludzku o pieniądzach. These are the two podcasts by Radek Budnicki, and one of them is about money, as you can guess from the title. One more podcast listed here is Karolina Sobańska, and this is an interesting mixture of interviews with, let's say, real doctors, and then also some astrologists and mystical people, etc. So it's always a good thing for an interpreter to know both sides, let's say, of the coin. Let's say the people who support vaccination and the anti-vaccine people, but here somehow this is combined in one program, which is quite interesting. Spasio o życiu. This is a podcast by a former flight attendant, and she tells about her experiences from those good old days. And this is quite interesting. If you like flying and you still have to stay at home because of restrictions in some countries, well, this is your chance to look deeper into the life of flight attendants and travelers. One more channel here is about artificial intelligence, which is called Opór jest daremny, nadchodzi AI. And one more channel here is Dwóch Typów Podcast. It is also quite long, and it can be found both on podcast platforms and on YouTube. Basically, these are two guys discussing different things in a very funny manner, or at least they try to be funny, but still it's worth checking if you need to learn colloquial language. So some conclusions here. Make sure you attend some conversation clubs. You can test this experience here on Polyglot Gathering, because this is what I did last year and I enjoyed the language rooms very much, but I wanted some continuation and I found it. One more thing is that it's really great to look for new words, because you are not only expanding your passive vocabulary this way, but you are also, while looking for those new words, you're expanding your active vocabulary, and this helps to speak better and to be more confident, to use your language at work, and to earn lots of money, hopefully. So this is probably it with my presentation, and now I'm ready to answer any questions if you have any. Okay, the name of the lady who discovered this circle. Actually, I believe she created it, and her name is Hadar Shemesh. And also in my presentation, you could see the Facebook group, which is called the Influency Community. She also has a podcast, which is called the Influency Podcast, I believe. And she also has a YouTube channel. Yeah, her name is Hadar Shemesh. Well, it's difficult to say if my learning evolved from B2 to C2, because some years ago I studied in the University of Warsaw, and back then I was at the C2 level. So these methods are suitable even for those who know language quite proficiently, but language is endless, and I don't fully believe in those levels. You are proficient in something, but then a topic comes, and suddenly you find lots of new words and lots of surprises. So it's an endless journey, but it's worth taking. Well, some interpreters say that they do this involuntarily. They just hear some words and they automatically translate them. I never do things automatically, but indeed, if you want to improve your interpreting skill, you sometimes have to practice actually doing the interpreting. And my very first experience happened 5 or 6 years in the forest when I found some podcast in English and tried to interpret it simultaneously. This was very unusual, but gradually I got some skill and then took a course, etc., etc. So I would say that no, I do not translate things in my head when I just consume content, but I would sometimes pay special attention if there is a word and I'm not sure if I would quickly find a good translation for that. And in this case, I can write the word down if I'm not at home, and then I can come back and check the word online. Oh, Belarusian is a big love of mine. Actually, many years ago, while listening to the radio, I found some Belarusian channel and I liked it a lot. And then when I had this weird hobby of reading The Little Prince in many languages, I guess I read it in 7, but in some strange way, Belarusian was my most favorite one. So this year I actually got even more interested with Belarusian because last year I met one of the participants here who is very proficient in this language, and also this year I also discovered that he is a presenter on the Polish radio in the Belarusian programs. So I started to listen to those programs daily, and now I would say I understand lots of Belarusian. And actually, some time ago, I even had a situation when I was translating online for a Belarusian event, and it was in Russian. I translated into English, but at some point, some participant switched into into their native language, and I had no problem with translation into English. How did I learn Polish? Well, this started from volunteers who came to my home city for a year, and a lady who was my girlfriend back then got interested in Polish at that time more than me, but thanks to her I learned about that course that was given by volunteers, and I took part just for fun, and gradually I realized I knew quite a lot of Polish, and when the course ended I ended up in Poland as a volunteer for a year. And this is where I improved my language, and then I came back to study in Poland, and then I started to use Polish at work. And and I also used the help of native speakers while learning Polish. I used some online sites to find conversation partners, so this was also helpful, but limited, because, well, I could put more effort into that, I believe. Okay. It is, I only heard that in some very professional organizations, interpreters would only work in one direction. But actually here in practice, we seldom have such events. In most occasions, we interpret both ways. So let's say at my yesterday's event, the presentations were given in Polish. So mostly I interpreted into Ukrainian, but then there were questions and answers, and there were also words of introduction. So in such interactions, I have to interpret both ways. Great Polish songs. Well, it strongly depends on the tastes. Some time ago, some years ago, on my Telegram channel, Happy Interpreter, I made an effort to present some of my favorite Polish music to my readers. And so for some time, every Friday, I was publishing some YouTube video for people to watch and hopefully to enjoy. But I will mention just one singer here, who is Robert Kaszprzycki, and he is, I believe his education was Polish language and literature. This contributes a lot to the quality of the texts he creates, and maybe he is not the most well-known in Poland, but his texts are really deep and they helped me to learn Polish quite a lot. Thank you so much for listening, and I wish you good luck with your learning of Polish and other languages. Powodzenia!